It's time for the Sustainable Ministry Show. This is episode number 14. They call me Sass. Today, we're hanging out with DeJong and Chris Sasser, and we're going to talk about what it looks like to leave well from your position at the church. Not that we're encouraging you to do so, but when the time comes, we certainly would love to see you do that with excellence. We've got a couple announcements as we get started. One is that this podcast, as soon as the Google Play podcast store opens up, which looks like it's going to be sometime in April, early May, this show will launch with that. And as that comes together, we'll tell you more, but it looks like sometime around May. And then on March 23rd, we would love for all of y'all to join us at 2 o'clock. We're going to do a live show. So you can pick this up on YouTube, join in on the conversation, send us messages and questions as we chat that day. So hopefully that will fit into your schedule. But without further ado.
Very important question though, Bryant.
Yeah.
March 23rd is in the middle of March Madness potentially. So we may need to be like giving an update on scores as we're doing the live show, just so you know.
Yeah, okay.
What day of the week is that? You know what day of the week that is?
I think it's a Wednesday.
Should be a Wednesday.
Yep. We'll have a bracket. Should we have a bracket?
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Chris, since I got you up, you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us who you are, where you're at.
Sure. My name is Chris Sasser. I am the Director of Family Ministries at Port City Community Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've been here for about 3 years. Kind of overseeing everything from birth through college. Lots of great folks to work with. It's super fun. Before that, I was at a church in Raleigh, North Carolina for 19 years that I had to leave. And so I kind of have a passion for kind of helping folks leave well, which we'll be talking about today. And I've been with Ministry Architects since 2008, trying to do the best we can to just help churches be sustainable and be in a healthy place. So that's me.
Awesome. Jen?
Yes, I'm Jen DeJong. I live in Springfield, Illinois, the land of Lincoln. And I've been a youth director off and on since about 2001, so about 15 years. And I'm in a season of life where I am a mom and a wife and a ministry architects consultant, and I'm not currently serving on staff at a church. But excited to be a part of this today. I've been with Ministry Architects since 2004, so about 11, 12 years.
That's fantastic. Some people would say Springfield is also the home of The Simpsons.
Yes. We like to believe that the Simpsons are from here. We have all kinds of things that we can tell you why they're from here, like a lake that has three-eyed fish and, the whole Jedediah Fox guy that they have in that show. We think it's Abraham Lincoln that they're talking about. So we would argue that they're from here. We didn't win the contest, though. There was a contest a few years ago when the movie came out. And Springfield, Vermont, I think, beat us out. We got second place.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I would have voted for y'all.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That almost feels like a loaded comment there, Chris, but
I'm just going to leave it and let it linger.
So as we get started today, one of the things we often share with churches when we're on site is that your staff are all interims. That all staff at churches are not going to be there lifelong. Certainly, we don't hope that anybody leaves tomorrow, but we do know that staff will change and that there will be some turnover in that place. So, Jen, you actually spoke about this a little bit at the summit with the Youth Cartel recently. What do we mean when we say that staff are interims?
Yeah, I think we have kind of in our own minds, and the church has in their minds, that this is a permanent position. And so I'll ask people, are you in a permanent position? And of course, most people will say yes, because that's what they think of their job as permanent. But the reality is none of us are permanent. We know that on some level. But, whether you're there a year, whether you're named an interim, whether you're there just a year or two, or whether you're like Chris and you've been somewhere for 19 years, Chris was not permanent, right? Like there's still going to be an end to your time at a church. I've been in a position in my life where my average length of time on staff at a church is about 18 months. I am the stat. But I didn't leave because I was fired or because it was, a bad situation. All of the times that I left was life circumstances. And so I think we just need to be okay with that and recognize that we are all interims and there is no permanent youth director. And so because of that, we always need to be thinking about what our role is. It's not just to be running our ministry. It's to be setting it up for the person that's coming after us.
So then with that in mind, what sort of things do we need to be doing in our work to prepare other people to come behind it? I remember sometime early in my career in ministry, somebody had said to me, ultimately, you just want to work yourself out of a job. And that to me sounded great, to have a job where I don't have a lot of work to do, right? Just being young in ministry, that sounded like a wonderful thing. And then I continued to find there was more work to do. But when we think of ourselves as interims, what does that change for us?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say before we talk about what it is, what it's not, because I think that we need to be clear about what we're not wanting to be, or what's a typical youth director kind of stance that maybe doesn't go with the concept of being an interim. So, for example, you hear all the time it's about relationships. It's all about the relationships. I want to, work on being with students more often, and I'm not saying that that's bad. It's definitely not bad. But when folks say that, they're saying that they are not as concerned with the structures and the systems that are in place in their position. They're putting the priority on their relationship with the kids rather than putting it on the priority of the ministry, of creating a system where other people can be involved. Now, there are probably people out there that say it's all about the relationships that have those systems and structures. But we just want to be careful that we don't lean so heavily on the relationship aspect that we're not creating the systems around us so that other people can be involved in doing that relational work. And then the second thing to keep in mind that we don't want to be about is in the book Sustainable Youth Ministry, Mark DeVries talks about the superstar. And we've seen it. I know you've seen it, Bryant, and Chris, I know you've seen it, this concept of the staff person's going to do it all. There is a superstar mentality problem in our country, specifically in youth ministry, and I would actually argue to say at the senior pastor level also. And so we just don't want to make that mistake of living into that role of being the superstar, because then when you leave as the superstar, when your interim time is up, then they're in a place of hurt. And we do have a fun little video, if you want to show it, Bryant, of what this looks like when someone is in that kind of superstar mentality.
All right. Check it out. We're going to do it just like this. Yeah, you know what time it is. We're my youth ministers. We're my youth ministers. We're my youth ministers. We're my youth ministers. All right. I'm a youth minister. I get paid to chill. I take you out to lunch and I buy you a meal. It's on me. And I know you're gonna love it. And when I said me, I really meant church budget. My goatee and my New Balance kicks. Bust up the acoustic and play some hot licks. Got my hair bleached out, cause it's so hip. Snap, wavy legs, cause they're so crisp. We're my youth ministers. We're my youth ministers.
What are some of the real ways that plays out then? Like if folks are trying to consider, like, am I playing into the relationship piece or am I building the structures in the church? What are some of the signs we can look at to say, yeah, I'm doing that? What are the pieces that would help us then contribute to building up those systems and structures? Is there like a little checklist that we could go through?
I'll jump in and I'll say that you probably need to think about what are the relationships that we're building into. because I think oftentimes, as youth pastors, we hear and we think that we've got to invest in the lives of the kids, but you have to create the systems and structures where you're investing in the lives of the volunteers and the adults,
Absolutely.
and all the people who are going to be there when your interim time is up. And so I think that's just a place of maturity for people in youth ministry to be able to recognize that, I can't be the superstar for the kids. I shouldn't be the superstar for the kids. I've got to build systems and structures to empower others to be the superstars for the kids. And so just the nature of the relationships that you focus on changes, and you can build systems and structures with recruiting volunteers, with volunteer training, with making sure that you're building the right manuals for volunteers to be able to run the events. I mean, how often do you see that a youth pastor kind of, runs an event and it all lives up in their head, and there's not really an opportunity to pass it off to someone else to be a different kind of superstar. And so it just changes the type of relationships that you build into, and focusing on those systems and structures really empowers other people to be able to live into the lives of these students in a much bigger way than you can as the youth pastor.
And I'd add to that, it's another way to say it is you're leading by stepping out of the middle. You're no longer the point person, no longer in the middle. And in addition to building up those people to be those superstars for you, I think it's important to remember too that we need to celebrate them. So we're not just sharing with the church the good stuff the youth are doing, but we're lifting up our volunteers, and we're sharing with the church how incredible the volunteers are as well, that our leadership, so you're constantly finding ways to tell the story that you're trying to create. You're constantly finding ways to share with the church who they are as a church, and that they are the youth ministry, and not you are the youth ministry.
And I think one of the things that youth pastors forget often is how long that takes, because you can't tell a story one time and expect that everybody's going to get it, and things are going to sort of culturally shift super fast. You've got to find that one little story where you maybe saw it happen one time, and you got to tell that story. And then you got to, hope that story kind of catches fire and it happens again. Then you tell that story, and you have to tell it, over and over again in lots of different ways and lots of different venues, to create a culture change where it's not about you being in the center. It's about, the way God's empowered other people to be, right in the middle of all these people's lives. And so have patience when you are trying to tell the story, and shift that.
Well, and you just said something, Chris, too, that strikes me. This is also a humility check for
huge.
A lot of us, right?
Yeah.
There is to stand up in front of folks and have their attention. There's a lot of ego that we may bring into that, and bring into ministry. And so to be able to step back and say, it's a wonderful opportunity, but how can I help other people take that role as well, in leadership, whether it's speaking up front, leading groups, being a part of a team. And the other thing that strikes too is even just thinking about capacity for ministry. At some point, our hope may be that the ministry grows beyond what we're capable of doing. And that's only possible by equipping other folks as well.
Yeah. I remember, Bryant, real quick, early in my ministry, I heard, Andy Stanley talking about this quote that just so seeped into me. And he said, the less you do, the more you accomplish, because the less you do, the more you enable others to accomplish. And so, as youth pastors, we can kind of grab at doing everything. And I remember I felt like I had to play the guitar and learn how to edit the videos and make sure that, I bought the pizza, and I was right in the middle of all that. And the moment that I realized, oh, wait, I need to do less so that others can do more, the ministry exploded in a way that it never would have with me trying to do more. And so it's counterintuitive. You can fight a culture sometimes that thinks you should do more, but it takes time to sort of shift that culture.
Yeah.
That's great.
And how to do that is that's a whole nother conversation.
It is, yeah.
But it's so important.
Yeah, it is.
What are some of the other pieces to that then that maybe we should highlight to leave well? We talked about building our team and making sure that the team is strong and supported and up. Are there other things that we need to do as well?
I think if you know you're leaving, or if there's a possibility that someone is, that you're leaving, I think then that's a different conversation. So we've got the whole concept of we're all interim, so we should all set our ministries up that way by leading, by stepping out of the middle, and by equipping our volunteers, the adults who are actually going to be in the church probably 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, those are the folks who stay, are the ones that are going there with their families. So there's that aspect of it, but then there are people who are leaving. And so I think we need to talk about that a little bit too, that the worst thing you can do when you are leaving, if you know you're leaving, is to wait or not tell everybody and think that that's, going to be better to wait until, you're really sure, or until it's closer to the time. And then along with that, I've heard it before, and I've actually been in a position where I walked into this, where they left a blank slate, because they wanted the next person to have the freedom to choose what was going to happen. And that's the worst thing you can do. I think that's the biggest mistake that churches make, is by saying, let's just leave a blank slate so the next person can figure out what they want. It can be their vision. I actually had that happen. I walked into a church and they literally had nothing except for a Sunday school class. And so the whole first 6 months I was building a ministry because they thought that was a gift to me, which it was great. It was wonderful to be able to make all those decisions. But imagine if I could have walked into something that was already established, how much quicker I could have gotten on-ramped to who are the people involved, what are the volunteers doing, what kids are coming, and to be able to maneuver that. Instead, the first 6 months, I was literally trying to figure out, who are my volunteers going to be? What kids are coming? I don't even have a directory. I don't even know who I should be calling. And so it was this whole kind of research and development time for about 6 to 9 months of just trying to figure out what I needed to do. And I think the biggest gift we can give when we do leave is to set all of that up before we go. So you're giving them the information. Don't think of it as you're making decisions for them. You're gifting them with a ministry that's already running that they're going to jump onto. And then they can create new initiatives. They can, make tweaks here and there, but giving them a plan and giving them information and setting up the calendar, setting up the curriculum for next year, having a directory of the kids and the leaders, all of that information is so important for the next person that's coming on.
Hey, and Jen, I can speak to that from the other end of that because, I was at my church for almost 20 years and then I left, and the church that I came to had just had a ministry architect's assessment. And so the church obviously had lots of programs that were already going on, but I had the reports. I had what people had been saying. I had, what the recommendations were, and I had a timeline. And I tell you, as someone walking into that, it made all of the difference in the world, because I didn't have to take, like you did, a long amount of time figuring all that out, because, I think oftentimes, there might be a blank slate, but there's not in people's heads. Like, people have expectations, and they have, the parking lot conversations, and they have what they want. Well, I had it all in a document and, in a process that was ready to kind of go. And it probably put me ahead, a year or a year and a half in being able to sort of do some things that, I knew walking in that we needed to do. So I was on the totally other end of that, and it was incredibly helpful.
Yeah, so that absolutely is something that we at Ministry Architects are always trying to do, and so it's a huge piece of what we're about. And as you heard, Chris, living it it's such a cool thing for you to be able to share that with other churches, but then also to experience it yourself. So I think we also have to talk about I think it would be good to talk about the three kind of people or teams that then we would suggest you have. No matter what part of the, if you're leaving, if you're new, if you're in a place that you've been for 10 years, we're always going to say that a sustainable ministry has three types of people. Or teams, and that's the architect, the vision group, the general contractor, and laborers. And so no matter what phase of, ministry you're in, that's the goal, I think, is to always be setting up your ministry that way. If you're leaving and you don't have that, the next person to have a vision team or a group of people that are helping with the strategic plan of the ministry long term, and then to have a general contractor, someone who knows all the different pieces and is managing that like an air traffic controller, and then to have laborers, or, that's another word for a volunteer in a lot of cases. Sometimes churches have staff as laborers, but the people that are doing specific ministry roles are the laborers. And to be able to set that up so that when that interim position that you're in is over, you have all of these other people that are already involved, and it's one kink. It's not the whole system falling down.
Well, we make it easy that way too. Once we've vacated that position for whoever the staff committee is, then to hire as well, because they know clearly kind of the skill set at that point, what they're asking for that new hire to do when they come in. I wonder too, Jen, you mentioned about like the announcement just briefly a minute ago. And it occurs to me that worked with a church this year who just knew that their staff person was going to be getting married and that they would be moving at the end of the school year. And so they had, about 8 months worth of time in between. And then another who their staff person in young adult ministry vacated the position with just the 2-week notice. Is there some, magic amount of time that that should be used for an announcement? How should that be navigated?
Yeah. So Brian, I think the most important thing to think about, there's not really probably an answer that works for everybody all the time. I think it's more a matter of being polite and thinking about what's best for the church, because the timing is probably in every scenario going to look different. But obviously, if you're getting married and you're not coming back a year from now, I don't know that you need to share that information, but you should definitely be setting up your ministry like you're leaving. But the good news is that we all should be setting up our ministry like we're leaving. So when you tell them shouldn't be as important as how you are running your ministry. Because if you are setting your ministry up for your departure, the departure is not going to hurt. I mean, it will hurt on an emotional level. It'll hurt because they'll miss you, because they don't want you to leave. But if you are doing all the things that we're talking about here, leading from out of the middle, equipping your volunteers, creating your teams, being organized, having systems, then the announcement piece it's going to be a disappointment, but it's not going to be this huge gaping hole that the church is going to feel, because they're going to realize they have systems going as you leave and as they search for the next person. Every person's different as far as how much time they have before they know they're leaving. I was actually in a position where I got pregnant, and we were pretty clear, my husband and I were pretty clear that I wasn't going to work after I had the baby. But you don't tell people you're pregnant right away. So then there was the whole first 3 months of the pregnancy. I didn't say a word about the pregnancy. Then we announced the pregnancy, but it was still 6 months before the baby was born. So I didn't say anything about the job piece. But I knew that I was not going to be there, and I had set it up so that when I left, it wouldn't fall apart. And then, I think I maybe gave him a couple of months notice. So the baby was due in July. I think I told him in April or May. School year timing is also important, as you all probably know, that it's probably not a good idea to let him know on August 1st, like just be polite about it. Give him as much warning as you can. But I think the most important gift you can give them is to set it up so that when you leave, it's going to run without you, or it'll at least continue in kind of a maintenance mode until they get the next person.
Yeah, I love how you described it, really, because if we are building the ministry in that way, then it could be that we leave in 2 weeks, and it just carries on just the same. Even though hopefully we might be missed, and our personality and impact will be gone, but the ministry will carry on just the same. Your leaders will continue to do what they do. Your schedule will continue to go on just like it was planned. Your event coordinators will carry on those events. And that is a beautiful, beautiful gift to the church.
And just to be clear about what that looks like, because I feel like I know some folks who maybe feel like they're giving away the ministry, but if they were to leave, it would not function the same way as it does with them there. And I think at any level, that's the case. Anytime anyone leaves, it's going to, things are going to shift a little bit. But just to give you an example of one of my partner churches that I'm working with, and I can say this because he and I talk about it. He's in a place where he has a lot of volunteers that are doing a lot of great things at youth group, Sunday school, and I think they feel equipped. But he is still the point person. Every week he sends the email to his team. Every week he's making decisions about what games they're playing. Every week he's telling them what the content is. And I've been encouraging him to shift that a little bit to someone else gradually. He can still speak into it. He can still be a part of the decision-making process, but there's no reason that he needs to be the one, to be sending the email and to be choosing the games. And, for him to be driving that is not, it's him still being in the middle. And so I think we just want to make sure that people hear us say, we're saying you don't have to be the one to do all of those things. And you can have a volunteer send the email to the team. You can have a volunteer choose the games. Maybe you meet with them once a month and you go through what you think would be great. Or, you don't have to be the one to pick all of the stuff. So just make sure that if you have a lot of volunteers and you know that they're great and that they're strong leaders, it's more than that to be able to lead them well. They need to have the capability, the ownership, and the permission to function a little bit like staff before that transition actually will work, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Well, how would you all feel? Chris, you have something else on your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with Jen. I don't think there's kind of a magic formula for how long it should take, but I did have a great mentor of mine tell me a long time ago, and this was before I was leaving my church, just as we were talking. He said, kind of in a healthy environment, if you can, give your church a week for every year you've been there, kind of once you announce.
Wow.
Which is, in my case was 19 weeks. Which is very unusual, but if it's a good, healthy environment, kind of your gift to the church is giving them a chance to say goodbye to you. How often do we see, youth pastor, get a new opportunity, a new job, and all of a sudden they're gone in 3-4 weeks or a month even, and kids are left asking questions: where'd he go? What happened? Why? It creates distrust in the church. It sets up a bad environment for whoever's coming in next, and so. As authentic as you can be, I think, and as much time as you can give a church if it's a healthy situation, I think that's the best. Now, that goes back to what we talked about a little while ago. That takes a lot of humility because, once you announce you're leaving, we all know you kind of go into lame duck status in some way, shape, or form because people begin to plan for what's next. But, at that point, it's just about loving people and trying to leave the church in the healthiest, and that's the key word for me, the healthiest possible scenario for the people that are there and whoever's coming in next. And so, that's just some stuff that I was thinking that isn't, kind of a hard and fast rule of thumb, but I've seen it work well. And I've seen, when people don't leave well. I think it's more about how you leave than how long it takes you to leave. And the selfish, part of us, we know if someone leaves poorly, that's what people are going to remember about them. Right? If you're at the church for 5, 6, 7 years, you do great ministry, but something happens and you leave poorly, well, everybody's just going to remember that he or she left because of that thing or that happened or they, argued about this or whatever. And that's going to kind of be the legacy you leave behind. And not that it's about that in any way, shape, or form, but a pattern of bad legacies in a church creates, bad environment for students and leaders and volunteers and all that kind of stuff. So those are just kind of a couple tidbits that they're kind of just sort of squishy. They're not really hard and fast, but I do think, your goal is to leave it healthy and you figure out how to do that and swallow your pride on the way out.
Well, and since ministry is really about relationships, part of our goal should be to do it in such a way that the relationships are healthy. And that when we do leave, we leave them in a good, healthy place, and it's a time of celebration rather than maybe a time of frustration, right?
Yeah.
So you guys have a lot of input and a lot of thoughts, a lot of good ideas here. How could people follow up with you if they have more questions about leaving well and what that might look like? where can they get in touch?
Well, for me, you can email me at chris.sasser at ministryarchitects.com, or I'm at Twitter at Sass, S-A-S-S, Gymsox, Gymsox. Don't ask now, but you can ask later. At Sass Gymsox, or I am on Facebook. You can find me at Chris Sasser.
And you can find me at Jen at ministryarchitects.com, or Facebook as well, Jen DeJong.
And I am Bryant Johnson. You can email me at bryant@ministryarchitects.com, or find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Bryant Johnson. And for those of you that are on Facebook, don't forget to like Ministry Architects. Just do a quick search, like them, like Ministry Architects on Facebook. And you can also subscribe to this podcast, either through iTunes, simply by searching for Sustainable Ministry, or on YouTube as well. Thanks so much for your time today, you guys.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody. Go Duke.
You just wait till March Madness, Jen. That's all.
Ha ha!